Merci. May I ask Councillor Gardner to lead us in the singing of the national anthem?
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Merci au conseiller Gardner.
Bienvenue.
We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Benedette Clement,
Présent.
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
Présente.
Elaine McDonald,
Present.
Sid Gardner,
Ici.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Present.
Cataline Hébert,
Présent.
Councillors Maurice Dupel,
Present.
Glenn Grant,
Present.
Todd Bennett,
Present.
Justin Towndale,
Present.
and Eric Bergeron.
Present.
Merci. Additions, deletions, amendments? Seeing none. Adoption of the agenda. Councillor Dupel, Councillor McDonald, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of interest? Councillor Hébert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare conflict of interest when it comes to the presentation on the tree canopy and the unfinished business item number 1 on the corporate policy for the tree canopy. Transition Cornwall Plus will be presenting and has provided the resources to write said recommendation. Transition Cornwall Plus is a working group of the Social Development Council, which I am an employee of, the Executive Director.
Thank you. Any other disclosure? Okay. Committee of the Whole. I need a motion to go into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Grant, all in favor? Carried. Minutes for the meeting of November 12, 2019. Councillor Gardner, Councillor McDonald, adopting the minutes. All in favor? Carried. Madam Clerk.
We have one presentation this evening, and that is the Protection and Enhancement of Tree Canopy and Natural Vegetation by Susan Towndrow from Cornwall Transition Plus.
Come on up, Ms. Towndrow. Welcome to Council.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of Council. My name is Susan Towndrow, and I'm a member of the group Tree Action Arbor, which is a working group of Transition Cornwall Plus. And it's our privilege to be part of a conversation on the updated tree canopy and natural vegetation policy that is on your agenda tonight. It's the result of a collaboration process between our group and several city departments through the coordination of Jamie Fothrop, the manager of Parks and Recreation Department. Now, there are times in the life of a community when crucial decisions need to be made that will profoundly affect its future, and I believe this is one of them. Recent declarations by both the World Health Organization as well as the United Nations make it clear that climate change is a threat to human health and the ecosystems on which we depend. Although we are a small community, we need to be part of the solutions in whatever way we can. Increasing and protecting the tree canopy and natural vegetation in Cornwall is one of the cheapest and most effective ways of addressing climate change. It is one way in which we can act right here, right now. And this year, you are to be commended for showing real leadership when you identified environmental sustainability as one of the 5 key priorities for the city. And then further, by supporting this with the creation of a new committee of council, the Environment and Climate Change Committee. And now is the time to add action to the leadership. In order for this policy to be effective, it needs to have clear goal of 30% tree canopy cover, the minimum required to maintain a healthy ecology. There needs to be a way to measure our progress and the funds to plant more trees. We would urge council to make sure these items are an integral part of this policy, along with the necessary funding. Keeping in mind that there are a variety of creative ways to raise funds. It doesn't have to all come directly from the city. And Cornwall, like all other communities across Ontario, is preparing a tree canopy policy that is required by the province under Bill 68. And we can be proud of the fact that this document will certainly be shared with other communities who are also doing this and who will possibly look towards us as leaders in this endeavor. Now, while council and staff can provide leadership, they can't do this alone. The policy before you contains a strong public advocacy component. Encouraging the community will be crucial in building public understanding and support. It will encourage actions by all the various partners, community groups, and individual citizens in helping to achieve the goal we set out. This policy will form an important part of the environmental sustainability priority. Well-designed green infrastructure will be seen to be just as important as any other city infrastructure. It will not only make the city more beautiful, but has been shown to advance the economic, the health, and the environmental well-being of the community as well. So this evening, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Mike Rosen. He's the president of Tree Canada, who is generously contributing his time tonight. He's come from Ottawa to share his knowledge and to talk about the value of trees and wildlife in our communities. And with over 30 years of experience, Michael leads Tree Canada in stakeholder relations, building partnerships, governance, and program management. So we also have his colleague, Danielle Saint-Aubin, who came tonight with him, and she is the newly appointed CEO of Tree Canada. And I would like to extend a big welcome to you both. So thank you for your time, and we'll be pleased to take questions after Michael's presentation. It'll be about 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Rosen.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. Members of council, Madame la mairesse, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation de présenter aujourd'hui. Thank you so much for inviting us and to have us here to present to you today. I'll have to work closely with Manon, I think, on the slides. It's an animated presentation, Manon, so you'll just, I don't know, I'll give you a magic signal and you'll have to just click away there and we'll do the best we can. So I'm a registered professional forester. I've been working with Tree Canada for 17 years now. Before that, I worked with the Ministry of Natural Resources. And I have a specific specialty, if you will, in forestry, in that I've been involved in urban forestry almost my whole career, including working for the National Capital Commission as a student, protecting elms against Dutch elm disease in Ottawa itself. So I do have a history with trees, obviously. I just want to tell you that what you're going through with respect to trees and dealing with tree issues and tree protection and canopy cover and plans and things like that is something that is being seen right across the country. And there's nothing to say that a city the size of Cornwall, this is something unusual to deal with. It's something that I'm having to address and talk to communities right across the country, and it's something that's being shared. You know, over 82% of Canadians now live in cities, and because of that, trees in those cities are achieving a much higher value than they ever have in the past. So I'd make the argument cities like Cornwall, who have seen quite a transition in their economy, are looking at trees in a totally different way than they have in the past, and it's something that I've seen going right across the country, British Columbia, even up into the territories. I was in Yellowknife in 2017 talking to the council in Yellowknife about their urban forests, which may strike you as curious in that they're literally steeped in forests themselves. So, Manon, we can advance. Keep clicking there, Manon. We'll see how we do here. Okay, so these are some of the accomplishments of my organization. That's good. I work with an organization called Tree Canada, and we've been around since 1992. We're a not-for-profit charity. We're the largest national not-for-profit charity that has to do with trees, and we're based in Ottawa. And these are some of our accomplishments, including the fact that we have a National Tree Day. It's the Wednesday of National Forest Week. And yeah, if you'd like to keep going. This describes very generally the 4 pillars that all of our programs fall under. Green Communities is that's our grants that we offer to communities themselves. We do a lot of reforestation and carbon offsetting, a bit of research, and we respond to natural disasters through a program called Operation Relief, whether it's hurricanes or fires or insect infestations. We generally generate funds, and we provide funding to residents and municipalities to help them bring trees back after natural disasters. I should have mentioned that we're totally privately funded. So some of Canada's large nationally known companies, including Shell and CN and IKEA and TELUS, are all supporters of Tree Canada, and that's where our primary funding comes, although we do have funding that comes from donations and some government funding as well. I know. Keep going. Yeah, so there's 3, that's good. Basically, this slide is showing that there's tremendous benefit in large trees. So a lot of the focus of urban forests, it's quite different from what you call industrial or traditional forestry, is trying to preserve trees as long as possible, trying to get them to be as large as possible. And what this graph is showing you is that there's actually exponential benefits in large trees over little trees when we come to environmental, economic, and social and psychological benefits. In other words, the benefits of a big tree is exponentially greater than that of a smaller tree. So a lot of the emphasis in urban forestry is actually trying to preserve, if you will, or maintain old trees on the landscape. Next. Environmental benefits are huge, and those are the ones that you're probably all pretty familiar with. The idea that trees, sequester carbon dioxide and other gases, that they give us oxygen, but they also create a whole bunch of other conditions as well, including eliminating or minimizing erosion and providing a noise barrier against things, and use in architecture is very well known as well. Next. The economic benefits I really want to emphasize to you tonight. Keep going, Manon, just a couple more. Yeah, that's good. I just want to emphasize a few things with the economic benefits. Sure, there's energy conservation. In other words, the properly placed trees in your residence will in fact block winter winds and will minimize the amount of air conditioning you need by placing, for instance, hardwoods or shade trees on the south side of your property. There's all kinds of techniques to save energy in that way. There's studies around property values actually increase when they are treed. There's a tremendous amount of employment which comes out of the tree industry itself. But the one that I really want to emphasize to you tonight is, Cornwall as a destination for business and for people to live in. So business and capital, if you will, as you know, is very fluid. And business can choose to take root and support a community anywhere in the world. And so my argument to you is that business wants to exist and people want to live in a nice-looking place that is well-treed. So I would say it's to your advantage, Cornwall, and as is to the advantage of every place in Canada, to be as well-treated as possible to attract business and to retain people in the community itself. And there's been many studies that have proven, actually, even in they've done shopping district comparisons of shopping districts that have been treed versus untreed to show that customers will actually pay a higher price and think that they're getting a better shopping experience from a district that is well treed versus one that's not treed, when the experience and the goods are exactly the same. There's all kinds of psychological work at play to tell people that when they're in a well-treed area, they feel better. And that leads me to my next slide. And when we get into, yes, keep going. These are just a number of studies that have been done. Yeah, that's good right there. These are all mostly American studies which show that things like, there's a famous study in Chicago that looked at 2 public housing areas, one treed, one not treed. The one that was treed had statistically less domestic violence, attention deficit disorder, and graffiti violence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, including the idea that hospital patients, there's this famous study of hospital patients able to see greenery out of their window, healed faster than ones that did not, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot to so greenery, yes, it looks nice, but there's something to it that's a bit more in-depth than that has to do with our physical and mental health, you know? Yes, and here's a number of other studies all around sort of reducing depression, decreasing healing times, et cetera, et cetera. Next. Tree Canada did a study in 2015 of what municipalities needed as far as urban forest goes, and it came down to these 5 pieces came out on top of what municipalities said they need. One is many smaller communities, of which I'd actually put Cornwall in that category, are very limited by having less staff to manage a urban forestry program. Large municipalities have another problem in that the people actually managing the program are managers and don't have much field experience. That's a whole different thing. Municipalities also talked about bylaws, that that the larger municipalities tended to have bylaws to protect their municipal trees, but that a number of municipalities really weren't sure whether they even had a bylaw to protect private trees or not. Most municipalities in Canada are not really sure of their canopy cover. Remember, this was done in 2015. Things actually have changed since then due to certain laws that have provincial laws and that sort of thing, so that municipalities are now being forced, if you will, to identify their canopy cover and talk about growing it. Most municipalities agree that the pressures on their urban forests are coming from development, a lack of funding, and a lack of planning. And finally, we asked municipalities what they'd like to see as far as urban forestry or trees in the city research goes, and a lot of them talked about soil conditions, better soil research, improving resistance to pests and disease, identifying proper tree species, and exploring. But on the social side, they talked about exploring different communities' perspectives of the urban forests, multi-purpose green spaces, and analyzing and advocating for public health benefits of trees. These are all components of a typical municipal urban forestry program. It starts with a plan, so you would have to have a plan in place. That's sort of number one. The plan, in fact, articulates all the other points you see on this slide. In other words, who's responsible for the trees? Is it its own department? Does it report to Parks? Is it part of Public Works? It also details the idea of a citizens committee and what the interplay should be between council and a tree committee, if you will. There's a piece around the legal basis of trees. In other words, where do bylaws fit in? That's articulated in the plan. An inventory, of course, is absolutely essential. Figure out what kind of trees do you have, how old are they, when are they going to die, what species do we need to plant and where. Those are all basic questions that a plan could articulate. But the plan also articulates how the planting takes place, what kind of trees, how big a tree, how the tree will be maintained, when will pruning take place. Is it every 10 years? Is it every 20 years? That sort of thing. Integrated pest management has to do with what happens if there is a pest outbreak. How is that handled? Operational management. When do we do inventory? When do we do training? Disaster planning, meaning what happens when there's an ice storm or something like that. And finally, it's not really on this slide, but I'll add it in anyways, is all about public education and dealing with the public. Like how are the public informed about the urban forest and its value and that sort of thing? 60 to 70% of your urban forest is actually going to be privately owned in Cornwall. So the private resident has a huge role in supporting and maintaining that forest. Next. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questions from council? Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you for the presentation. 2 questions.
Sure.
I'm kind of interested in the property value increase that you
Yes.
touched on. Can you explore that maybe a little bit more? And I'll add the second question, so I figure you'll jump into it anyway. How do you get private citizens to understand, A, there's an increase here, but in terms of actually helping the citizens reach that canopy growth that we're looking for?
Okay, so it's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah,
So,
but I think
okay.
they're-
So the first part around real estate values, that's like, that's just basic research done. Most of our research, unfortunately, with urban forestry, not unfortunately, it's the way it is, it comes out of the United States. So we depend on them for a lot of their work. And it's a study that has been done right across the United States to show that those properties that are treed just demand that much higher a value, they just have a higher real estate value. Of course, I didn't talk about it, but of course that would speak to maybe I'm treading into a dangerous territory here, but it would speak to, obviously, that would reflect the tax rate, and obviously the municipality would receive greater revenues through the increase in the property values accordingly. The other part of your question was about the public. That's a difficult one, of course, and that's one, it's really essential, and it takes, I would argue, and we can help you with this, but we can help you with a lot of this stuff, by the way. I didn't mention that, but that's where we fit in at Tree Canada, is that there are certain, and I haven't talked to it, but besides the granting programs, we do have a lot of knowledge within our office that we can help you with as well. But launching public education programs around the value of trees is absolutely essential to seeing you, and unfortunately, it's not a short-term thing, it's a long-term thing. You have to start, best time to have started that was maybe 20 years ago, but sooner than later, constant messaging of the value of the positive values of trees. I know that people can come up with lots of negative values, or they can come up with negative values of trees, but I think just from my presentation, if you're able to show, these health benefits, physical and mental health benefits, I mean, it's very striking for people to realize that trees are more than just something that embellishes a street or something that puts some leaves on my lawn, that it actually can have an effect on my life, puts it into a different framework. There's the celebration, there's a National Tree Day in September. I would suggest that, maybe as a first step that the city consider focusing around National Tree Day. This year, next year it's going to be September 23rd, that you make that a focus for whatever in your biggest park, having a tree day. We would be there, a number of groups would be there, something to show people the value of maintaining and how easy it is actually to maintain trees on their lawn, on their landscape.
If I can just
Go
follow
ahead.
up.
Yes.
You were touching a little bit on the ROI of a tree in very real terms here. Is there a way to calculate that? Is there
Yes, absolutely.
a measurable way?
There's a
of
program called iTree. It's out of the United States. It will give you the actual dollar value of a tree or a group of trees on the landscape. It's downloadable. It's easy to operate. It'll actually, and from a city point of view and a planning point of view, it'll also show you what would be the cost of like if you had to eliminate a woodlot, for instance, what are the costs of doing that from an environmental point of view? In other words, for instance, stormwater retention. How big a stormwater pond do you have to construct, and how much would that cost to maintain the same environmental value of having X hectares of forest? So that's quite possible.
Thank you. Last question, if I'm allowed.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you name 1 or 2 communities that are kind of leading the charge here and what they're doing that maybe we could learn from?
Okay. This is a question, I have to tell you, the media ask me this all the time. They always want to know who are the good players. I mean, right off the top of my head, and I did have another slide, but unfortunately I couldn't show it, which actually showed, and I'll get into this, it actually showed the number of dollars spent on urban forestry per person in various communities across Canada. And that's an interesting one too. And actually I happen to know, I talked to staff and I happen to know what the dollar value was in Cornwall, actually, of how much you're spending on urban forests with the number of people you have in this town. And suffice to say, you're not leading in that charge, that there's work to do. So some of the communities that that lead, some of them are big, okay, like Toronto. Toronto spends $70 million a year on its urban forests. So they're up there, they're over $20 a person in the amount of money they spend on their urban forests. Just to give you an idea, Cornwall is under $10 a person. Okay, that's one way to measure it, but it's a bit of apples and oranges, so it's not clear, but it just gives you a general idea. Some communities that are doing not a bad, well, Ottawa's not doing a bad job. Perth is not doing a bad job. Gananoque is not doing a bad job. These are, I'm picking on purpose some towns that are, there's actually smaller than Cornwall, but something that I'm trying to get to something of your size. Kelowna, BC is doing an amazing job. Oakville, Ontario is doing an amazing job, but some of those places have considerable resources to dig into, if you will.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have Councillor Gardner and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you for the report. And mine will
Welcome.
be, what I say is basically personal.
Yep.
We have, and I'm not flouting this, but we have 14 trees on our property. And when my sons visit in the summer, they always leave by saying, we were so comfortable in the backyard this morning or this afternoon. It also speaks to my house being cooler and not using as much electricity, the air conditioner. One of my neighbors complains about the leaves in the fall, and I remind him how well he's breathing during the summer. The other thing that the trees have done is, I know that birds in the last few years, actually the last few days, we're losing millions of birds because they have no habitat. We have every bird you can think of, blue jays, you name it, they're in our backyard. On top of that, we're looking at squirrels, we have chipmunks, the odd skunk, but and rabbits. So it's helping in that sort of way. I really appreciate what you brought to the table, and what I thought was comfort in my backyard is actually the way it's treated. So thank you for that.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Somebody once said the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. Reading your social, psychological, and physical fitness thing, I didn't realize my red maple, 2 spruce trees, 2 apple trees contribute to my sanity. It apparently does.
Need more trees, Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you. My neighbors set yourself up. Maybe I could compete with him. When we talk about canopy, how do we judge this? Now, we take a picture of the, no.
Take a picture. Take a picture.
Is it available land? Do you include buildings and everything and then say you only got 30% coverage? Or do you say you've got all this vacant land and it's 30% of the vacant land?
Well, so you're taking, usually how they do it is they're taking its aerial photography, or what they call LiDAR now,
Yeah.
done in the growing season, so when the canopy is out.
Yeah.
And so, no, a building would be not canopy, and the canopy would be what's ever extended by tree and shrubs as well, and brush as well. That all gets mixed into the canopy cover.
I'm just wondering, as we develop as a community, more houses go up, more buildings go up, or commercial buildings take up all that space, does that take away from the canopy?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, unless you get into green roofs, that's a whole science onto its own.
Yeah.
But generally, yes.
I was surprised. What was the figure you're using was that a per capita figure, the $10?
Yes. Yeah. I'm
Just this to Jamie Fother. What do we spend in the last few years taking trees down and replacing them?
Through you, Madam Mayor, through our Emerald Ash Borer project, it spends $300,000 a year, and then in our operating budget, it's closer to $150 in operating. So
Yeah,
about
okay.
combined $450.
So disease has a lot to do with this too.
Well, if I can make a comment, your budget, if I understand that correctly, if it wasn't for Emerald Ash Borer, your budget for urban forestry would be about $150,000. Is that right? Something like that.
We'd have a lot more trees.
That's true, without Emerald Ash Borer,
Okay.
for sure.
I agree with you, the tree thing, that, it's convincing private owners to plant trees. And we don't do a great job, I think, at times with our own public. And it's got nothing to do with our people, but I drive down Brookdale Avenue. They planted about 100 trees, the federal government did, when they redid the bridge and the rest of it. And I count about 40 of them dead already.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it was poor planning on their part, not our part.
Well, part of it is,
I'm going back to the lack of maintenance. You mentioned maintenance. Well, on their behalf, there was a lack of maintenance. Nobody
there
was
you
paying
go.
attention after.
No,
they
no,
planted.
I'm not gonna tell you that it's like just throw the tree in and walk away, or it's not chicken feed. It's a bit of a science, and there is a budget, and there's a cost to it for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah, you have to pick the right tree. You have to make sure it's in the right place. You have to water it for a number of years. At one point, you're going to have to prune it. All those things are part of a plan. But that's the game if you want to keep
Yeah,
people
I-
healthy.
Former alderman called Dick Ober, he's here tonight, took me around one day, driving, say, they're not taking care of that tree, they're not taking care of that tree.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
things like you drive by, you don't even think of it.
I know. I can do this, or people planting under hydro lines. That's a whole other thing as well. Yeah.
Now, there are organizations that give out seedlings. I'm on the board of the Raisin Region Conservation. Fund.
Nice.
And one of the real popular programs we have, giving the tree giveaway once a year. And
Yep.
actually, they run out. There's a huge demand. So obviously, people are
Yeah.
planting trees.
Yeah. That's a great thing
Yeah.
for sure.
Anyway, food for thought. Thanks for your presentation. Gave us something to think about.
Thank you.
Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if I would be in order to make a motion in regards to this presentation?
Normally, we would make a motion to receive the report.
It's going to include that.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to receive this presentation and send it to our Environment and Climate Change Committee to come up with actionable items to improve and protect our tree canopy.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor DePel? Did you want to make any further comments?
Actually, I do have a question. I didn't read in this report anywhere and I had a conversation earlier today, so I know it was discussed, but the fact that we don't have any bylaws stopping people from cutting trees down just because. So, they don't feel like raking leaves anymore, so I'm going to cut my tree down. Are there communities that do have bylaws in place like this, and are they effective? Was there a big pushback against them? Just curious.
Okay, now we're getting into dangerous country here.
Yeah,
okay.
I figured. But
I'll give you my solicited opinion is you really should have a bylaw for your municipal trees.
Okay.
Okay? I'm not sure if you do. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Oh, boy. Okay. You want to protect your municipal trees are an asset to your municipality. They're right up there. I know this sounds bad, but they're right up there with fire hydrants and light standards and your hockey arenas. It's an asset. It's actually it's one of the few assets you have that's actually increasing in value over time. Everything else is crumbling. Your sidewalks are crumbling. Your roads, your bridges.
Easy there, Mr. Rose.
I'm just saying.
Easy.
No.
He's not even here one day.
It's the truth hurts. They crumble. This is life, right? Trees just increase in value. Anyways, I would strongly suggest. Excuse me, Madame la Mairesse, for the comment about the crumbling, but
That's okay.
anyways, that's the law of the law of the land. But no, seriously, the municipal trees, you need a bylaw. You do not want people cutting your municipal trees down without penalty. That, to me, is the bottom line. The private piece is a lot more trickier, I agree, and I don't believe it's something that you should probably, that would not be your first move, I would argue, as far as, your urban forest, getting more of a plan in place and policies in place, I think is a better for an education. Let's go that route to start with, but the municipal trees, you got to protect them for sure.
Okay, thank you. So that'll be one of the reasons why I'd like to send this to the Environment and Climate Change Committee, because I would expect that protecting our municipal trees would be one of the first recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Grant and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You talk about education, and that's good, but, you know, I have a hard time convincing my friends that we have a tree issue here, canopy. When we used to go golfing over in the States, and we come back over the old bridge, and all you saw was trees, and it looked like a forest. So I tried to convince my friends that, you know, you have to plant more trees. So, why? We have too many trees now. So education is a big thing, and these statistics that you put forth. And so it's all about educating people and getting to understand the importance of trees. And so I
Absolutely.
think the motion that Councillor just put forth is a good one, because we can come back and we can put on a good education program to demonstrate the need for more trees. And I think with climate change, people are looking and saying, yeah, we do need more trees because it's beneficial for our health. And I also think about the spring of the year, that I can't wait until the leaves come out in the trees, because it is psychologically beneficial for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps a couple questions and then maybe where this fits in. First of all, in terms of, you made reference to whose municipalities that are spending more money on tree canopy versus those who aren't. When you factor in, how do you determine how much municipalities are spending? And maybe I need to elucidate my point here. We have, for example, Gano Park. Now, I don't think we have, like, our staff going and pruning every tree in Gano Park, but certainly I think that if you're counting how many trees or how that affects the canopy, I would think you need to factor that in, but how do you put a dollar value to that? So I guess my point is, when we're comparing, what criteria do you use? You say you have 10 employees, they're doing this, so that's our math?
Exactly, yeah. I just asked, I should have mentioned, TreeCan is actually a legacy partner of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So I have access, if you will, to a huge municipal network, and we at Tree Canada, we know the forestry departments, if you will, of pretty well every municipality in Canada. So I surveyed them. I actually asked them, and it didn't take into account, for instance, the existing trees on the landscape. It basically said, how much money, what's in your municipal budget for planting, for maintenance, for things like injection for emerald ash borer, for planning, including staff and vehicles. And I asked that to a number of municipalities across the country, and I got a dollar figure, and I just divided by the number of people in that municipality,
Right.
and I came out with a range of values. The highest actually was, I believe, was Oakville was the highest, and I believe it was around $28 a person is what they spend per person in Oakville, and there are 200,000 people in Oakville. And I think one of the lowest was actually, believe it or not, Halifax, which spent, I think, somewhere around $6. And I believe that Cornwall was somewhere around $9.
So it's just a human beings
Yeah,
divided by.
yeah, it's just, well,
Which wouldn't account for parts of our municipality that aren't managed in the
no,
conventional sense.
it's
of the
just
word.
strictly how much money do you spend per person on
Per
your
person
trees.
on your
Yeah,
trees.
yeah.
Okay. Second thing is, you made reference to public education, the need to explain to people that trees are a good thing. In terms of and you said that you could help us with that.
Right.
Are we talking like you're gonna kind of offer us personnel to help us with that, money to help us with that? Like, what exactly does that mean?
Well, you just hit the two things that I'm not going to promise.
Well, and that's what, that's.
I'll
when
give
we're
you anything
sitting
but
here.
those
That-
two.
That's reality land. Do we talk
I
about
guess where I was
reality?
going with that one was that we have material, we have resources, we have knowledge, we have that sort of thing. But no, we're a not-for-profit. We have 20 people in an office in Ottawa. So, no, we wouldn't probably have too many people to
No
lend
money
you.
and very few people. Fair
But
enough.
we have access, but there are funding opportunities out there. That's another, and Susan mentioned that as well. You shouldn't think of it as something that totally has to be borne by your taxpayer. There are funds out there. Some are corporate in origin, others are through organizations.
Would you help us figure out
And I
how to
would help
find
you
that
figure,
money?
yes, I would.
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. The other thing, and this is more a question or a discussion to the motion in terms of procedure, Your Worship, we have an item on our consent agenda which is regards to policy. Now, I know traditionally consent, we just vote in favor of it and we move on. However, is it not? Policy
business.
16.1? Okay, all right, I stand corrected.
It's under unfinished business, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yeah, right, am I reading that correctly, or have I misunderstood that?
Madam Clerk?
Protection, enhancement, tree canopy, natural vegetation, planning, development, recreation, under unfinished business.
It's on the agenda
So
for
that is,
discussion. Yeah.
Privy for debate?
Correct.
Okay. And that being said, then, Your Worship, I'll reserve my comments with regards. The other question, and I guess this is to you, the chair, is we have a motion on the floor, but we have this on our agenda. Like, if we support this, how does that affect how this shakes out in terms of the other item on the agenda? Or can
Right.
we not maybe debate it all at once, or do you want to?
So I'm going to turn to the clerk or the CAO on this one. So traditionally, at this point, we
Would traditionally just
entertain,
receive the
report,
and
so yes,
say, "How do
and,
you want to proceed?"
but I'm going to ask the clerk if the motion as presented by Councillor Bennett and seconded by Councillor DePel is in order, as is.
If you don't mind, Madam Mayor, I think I would refer that to the CAO
Sure.
or to the department.
Sure, Madam CAO?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the policy that's on unfinished business tonight speaks to, I think, a enhanced policy to what we've
Right.
brought to council before. As far as certain initiatives, targetable actions, maybe community engagement, education, probably could be done by some efforts of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Also, components of that could also be assisted with some city resources. So if we go back to the terms of reference for the Environment and Climate Change Committee, there is also a component where other resources could be brought into that group as required. So that group is just getting formed. They certainly have not had a meeting as of yet, but I think that this could be a component that could be certainly, whether or not an initial priority for the Climate Change Committee, but I think this is something that they could look at as well.
That being said, Your Worship, support the motion. The only concern I have is that if the committee hasn't technically even sat yet as a committee, is that correct?
Hasn't sat yet, but the
Right.
members have all been selected.
Right. I guess my worry is that this might not get the attention that it needs in the time frame that perhaps we would like it, but I'll support it and kind of try and keep track of it. Thank you, if you would.
So as a follow-up, I think this is a result, the policy is as a result of Bill 68, right? So the province has mandated that we set up a policy.
Right.
Is that correct? So I'm not sure what the timeline is there. Madam CAO, or should I turn to Mr. Fothrop on that?
I believe that that policy needs to be in place this year. Mr. Fothrop?
Mr. Fothrop?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, actually the deadline to have the policy in place has passed, so we should have one in place. Now, I don't know that there are any repercussions for not having it in place
Okay.
as of yet, but I think there is a need to adopt a policy.
Has the province knocked on your door yet?
They have not yet.
They have not yet. I understand Councillor Hollingsworth's point, though, about
We're just
making
trying to-
sure that if this is, if we're going to wait until the Climate Change Committee comments, we'll want them to deal with this issue on a priority basis.
Sooner than later.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Rosen? Councillor McDonald.
So
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, it's not a question for Mr. Rosen, it's a piece of information for Mr. Rosen. You've shown us certainly a lot that we have yet to do, but I just want to tell you that we're a very sympathetic audience, as you
Good.
have intuited, I'm sure.
Yes.
But we've already made some pretty great strides, and I think Scott Porter, who's our manager of landscaping, has done a wonderful job. I don't know if you've seen the Arboretum in Lamoureux Park, the tour of all the trees that.
I have
and
seen
there's-
that, and
good,
I know
there's a-
Scott quite well. He's a good guy. He's well qualified.
Oh, good.
You got a good man there.
Yeah, and we've got that wonderful map too to hand to visitors to take the tour through the park and
Right.
appreciate the trees, so.
Yeah, no, I know you're not starting from zero. I know that.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah, there's a lot here to work with.
Thank you for that, Councillor McDonald. I thank you for commending Mr. Porter. I also want to thank the Towndrows for the commemorative tree program too, which is, I think, a very important piece of the appreciation for trees and the impact on our lives. Je vous remercie pour votre présentation, Monsieur Rosen.
Bienvenue.
You've seen our policy. Do you have any comments?
I've read it. I have to say I've read it quickly as we
Okay.
were traveling here, and so I would, but I appreciate that question, and I want to reflect a little bit more on it and get back to you on it if I
Okay.
can. There's nothing that jumps out at me though, to tell you the truth, where I read it and said, "Wow, that's really off base." There's nothing there. I would have. I have to tell you that I've always, I mean, the Cadillac version of this is to have the policies encased in some kind of a plan for your urban forest. That's the usual, that's the, not more I mean, actually, it's more typical to design the policies first because you're reacting to things that come up. But I'm just thinking, in general, you may want to consider, and this is something that, getting back to Councillor Hollingsworth's question about resources, that we may be able to help you find resources to do. But I would think that, having Cornwall have a management plan for their forest would be a really good first step.
Okay.
Or not a first step, but something to work towards, I'd say.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Towndrow, any further comments?
No, it's been very, very helpful to hear all the comments, and we were talking just before with Mike about having an urban forest plan.
Right.
That is really a good idea because one of the comments that you see so many trees, yes, you see a lot of trees in some areas, and then there are a lot of streets with no trees at all that look really stark. And so it would be nice to have something like that to address the total picture.
Thank you.
That's-
So we have a motion. Is everybody okay with the motion? I could see Councillor Bennett and Councillor Bergeron speaking. You're okay with that? So I'm going to call for the vote on the motion. All in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, Madam Clerk.
Moving on to consent, we have one item, that's the proclamation, 100th anniversary of Amalgamated Transit Union Local 946. And the recommendation is that council proclaim December 3rd, 2019 as Amalgamated Transit Union Lot 946 Day in the city of Cornwall. And if I might point out, Madam Mayor, we have some members of the Cornwall Transit here.
We do.
The executive is composed of Scott Zambanka, the president, Matt Levac, vice president, and Ken Evans, recording secretary.
So the entire second row is transit, I think. Happy birthday. So there is a 100th anniversary dinner on Saturday where we're going to recognize the Amalgamated Union and the length of time that it and its members has served the citizens of Cornwall. So we're very proud of that. Moved by Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Hébert. Councillor McDonald, did you want to speak, Councillor McDonald?
I would just love to say a word. I've had the opportunity a few times to be a mystery rider in Clean Air Day, And I'm always so impressed. People don't know who I am. They're riding the bus and I chat with them. And it's watching the relationship of the passengers with the drivers, because if you're on a certain route, you usually get the same driver and first name basis and the friendliness and watch your step and all this kind of thing. I think there's a wonderful camaraderie on the buses with the passengers and the drivers. So well done and keep it up
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
for another 100 years.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Lots of people know who you are, Councillor McDonald. Thank you. Next item.
We have no resolutions. Moving on to unfinished business reports. The first one is a corporate policy, protection and enhancement of tree canopy and natural vegetation, with a recommendation that council receive this report and endorse the policy drafted by administration.
Okay, so Councillor Bergeron, and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion, if I may, to receive this report and refer it to the Climate Change Committee to review and recommendations. I'll wait for a
Is there a seconder for that, Councillor Towndale? Okay, so that changes the recommendation, right?
Yes.
So I'll have you speak on it, and then I'll go to Councillor Bennett and whoever else wants to speak.
So action items are one of the items I was going to talk about, but we've already passed that, which is good. Well, it's procedure sometimes is tricky, but you know, we just saw this presentation. We have a deep understanding, I think, now of the value of trees. And I look at the report that we've received and what Transition Cornwall has recommended versus what administration is recommending, and I kind of get it. I would have liked to fully endorse what Transition Cornwall has recommended, but I understand why administration is saying it's not really costed yet, and so we can't do it, there's no budget for it. So I appreciate that, which is why I think our Climate Change Committee, which has not sat yet but is going to be sitting very soon, I think it's the perfect example of what we want this Climate Change Committee to do and why we have this as one of our big pillars in our strategic plan. So to me, the Climate Change Committee should be coming up with ways to get grants, with tax breaks maybe, community involvement, education, engagement, all of these things that we've just been talking about that we see as valuable that aren't maybe in the current report as is. So I'm willing to accept it. I think we need to find this hybrid of what is recommended versus what is in the report from administration. And so that's why I've made this motion. I hope council supports it. And I look forward to working with the Climate Change Committee on really coming up with some solutions to lower the cost, to be a little bit bold, to maybe not talk about 10 years, maybe talk about 5 years, 6 years, but to at least understand the cost of doing that. And so the ROI, all these things are, I think, need to be defined a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
I'm good. A lot of my questions are about cost, and he covered it, so I'm good.
You're
Thanks.
done? Thank you. Brevity, wow. Councillor Hollingsworth.
One quick question, Your Worship. I'm under the assumption that, to the mover and seconder, that the recommendations by the Transition Committee would be also sent to the environment, like there's two reports, they're very similar, but some slight, am I assuming that both reports would be sent for the Climate Committee's perusal?
So what is the motion again, Madam Clerk?
That council receive this report and review and refer to the Environmental and Climate Change Committee for review and recommendation of the policy drafted by administration.
So just for clarification,
So I'll recognize Councillor Bergeron in response.
Sure. The recommendations from the Climate Change Committee probably will match what Transition Cornwall has made, so there's no need to have both reports.
well, just there's some subtle differences. On page 50, well, I know for those that we're looking at 2-to-1, and the city is currently 1-to-1. So, I mean, that's a difference in terms of dollars and cents. I don't recall reading the report, Your Worship. There was discussion of a bylaw or some kind of legislation about whether people can just cut down trees in their own property or not. I don't recall seeing it. Maybe I've missed it. I'm assuming all that would go to the Environmental Committee for some kind of discussion. We don't have a bylaw currently about people cutting trees on their own property. Is that voted
So I just want to, is there clarity around the
To make sure I know what I'm
motion?
voting for,
Yes,
that's all.
that's okay. I want to make sure there's clarity around the motion. So is it the case that administration will have to, with this motion, send it to the committee, and the committee will look at both versions, the version proposed by Transition Plus and the version proposed by administration? Madam CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I'm reading the recommendation correctly, Councillor Bergeron said that council receive the report and refer it to the Climate Change Committee. So with what is attached in the report, all of that information would be shared with the Climate Change Committee.
Fair enough. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any further comment? Yes, Councillor DePel, sorry, I had you on the
That's
list.
all right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I fully support this, and I want to say that I echo Councillor Bergeron's remarks when we're saying that we need to get a little more bolder at climate control and looking at this report. And I think that hopefully this going to the Climate Control Committee, perhaps maybe then we could see what a plan over 5 years looks like with a price tag estimated that administration could help with, because I understand on the same note for administration that there is no budget in place. So, but if we were to look at this from having the education or the information shared with us tonight, I think that we need to definitely share it more with the community. But I think if maybe a plan is in place, a plan to me always makes sense. It sets goals and gives you your direction for moving forward. So hopefully those recommendations will come back through the Climate Control Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Very briefly, this morning I was at another meeting, and I agree with the motion that you've put forward, because at the other meeting we were talking about the future. So we're not stuck on what the recommendation is here. Recommendation is to give it to that committee, and then from that point on we can make adjustments. That's what happened today. That's what I hope will happen with this committee. To move forward with it.
Any further comments? To the point made by Councillor Hollingsworth, there are differences between what is recommended by administration and what is recommended by Transition Plus. In terms of, you know, the 30% over the 10 years, replacing a tree by 1.1 rather than replacing a tree with 2 trees. I mean, there's a difference. So I would be very interested in hearing some more analysis in depth around that from the committee. So I look forward to that. I will make sure that they sit as quickly as possible so that we can move forward in that, suggest to that committee that that be a priority, since we're already past the timeline for Bill 68 and the fact that we are mandated to put a policy in place. And I'm sure that the committee will also talk about tree bylaws as well as part of that discussion. I am certain that's all going to be connected. Councillor McIntosh, are you trying to
Just a point of
recognize? Yeah.
clarification.
Go
I
ahead.
understood Mr. Rosen to use the word municipal trees. Was that talking about private property or public property?
Public.
So you weren't talking about, is it okay to address? Okay, so it's not, you weren't talking about coming in with a bylaw where if a resident's going to cut down a tree, they got to run down to City Hall, get a permit, come back and go through all this. That's what I understood.
So Bill 68,
right then.
right, Bill 68 is about the province is mandating that. But the committee is probably going to want to have a broad discussion, especially if we're going to talk about, as Councillor DePel said, and Ms. Townjo spoke of a plan, then the discussion is going to be broader than just municipal trees, I would imagine. And that's a good thing. I do hope that we'll be able to turn to Tree Canada for some of those resources, knowledge, so that we can move forward as well. All in favor of the motion? Against? Carried. Thank you. I'll allow it. You're not
Technically,
quite allowed, but go ahead. Come to the mic, though, if you're going to say it, please.
I would just appreciate it, I know this is unusual, but I would appreciate if I could just have one picture, a photo with council in the background of myself and our CEO, Danielle Santobang. Is that all right?
Yeah, you can you wait till the end of the meeting?
We just take a second.
No, I'm going to turn to council and see if they're okay with that. Is there a consensus around?
Thank you.
Is there consensus?
start a precedent.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, no.
Okay,
Sorry.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
I have to check with council.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Next item, yes.
perhaps when Mr. Rosen comes back to help us celebrate Tree Day in September, we'll have a
September 2020,
group shot.
or before that. I mean, you may interact with our climate change committee as well, and there's lots of opportunity. Most of the time, these people love pictures. Just saying. Madam Clerk.
Our next item is the electoral system review, with a recommendation that council receive this report.
Well, I'll ask for a motion first. Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is the result of a motion I passed last December. Wanted to try to get ahead of it because as the report outlines, if we're going to look at this, it's quite a process. So you have to start it relatively early in the term. Otherwise, based on certain deadlines that are required by the Municipal Act, you won't meet them and you can't do it. I want to thank administration for the report. It goes into detail about the history of the ward system in the city, which I was not familiar with, and it was actually hard to find information on. So it's nice to have it compiled and actually get a clear answer on basically what happened, how it came, well, mostly how it came about, and whatnot. I think, you know, we're going to have to choose a path forward on this. It mentions, while the recommendation tonight is to receive the report, there is a mention of a potential cost for a consultant that could be discussed as part of the 2020 budget deliberations. Ironically, my initial motion actually requested a consultant, and this council said no. And it was the motion was amended so that it would be done in-house. And if anyone recalls that discussion last year, that's what happened. So that's kind of where we are. I think for now, I will receive the report and think on what the way forward could look like. I need to digest this. This is, you know, I saw it yesterday for the first time. Just a few comments I'll make. One thing I had thought about looking forward, in the past, whenever the ward system existed with 6 wards, there were 2 members per ward. Offhand, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'd be envisioning 1 member per ward, that sort of thing. But I do believe that this discussion does reflect around the size of council as well. I think should we decide to move in a direction with wards, that'll determine how many people would sit around this table, or if we decide not to go with wards, you know, that could still, there could be an impact on how many people are represented as well. But one thing that is very clear, the last time that the system was changed and the time before that, there were public referendums in place. It was a ballot question, and I think that's important. So whatever the way forward looks like, we need to do public consultation, and quite frankly, maybe the referendum's the way to go, but that would only be in 2022. So again, I'd like to thank administration for this report. I'm going to take a little while just to think on it, and I'll come back with something. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bennett, you seconded, didn't you? Did you want to speak?
Well, again, he covered pretty much what I was going to say.
Okay.
He was being redundant.
That's okay. Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah.
And then Councillor Hollingsworth.
The referendum's the only way, is the way to go in this. When I saw the $60,000, possibility of spending $60,000, all you do is blowing $60,000 on a consultant to come and tell us, you know, set up, plant a lot of trees for $60,000. And anyway.
Too soon.
Yeah. I guess we'd want to, I don't know if we put the cart before the horse, referendum first, then design it, or then design it first and take it to the public. I guess that's the issue. Certainly, we'd have a real deadline to beat if we're going to talk about the next municipal election. I think we're looking beyond that. If we're talking about cutting the size of council and possibly going to wards, it's pretty involved, pretty complex.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth and then Councillor Bergeron.
Just quickly, Your Worship, I know administration often says they want to hear, excuse me, get some direction from what council wants at budget time and where we're leaning, and while there is no formal motion, for the record, I don't want to spend 60 grand on a consultant to figure this out. Thank you.
Councillor Bergeron.
Can I just say ditto? That was what I was going to say. This report is pretty good. It's got a lot of information on it. But no, I don't think we need a consultant. So my question would be, can we do public consultations internally with the resources we have in the next 12 months, we'll say, so that it does fit a timeline of deciding whether this is a referendum or a motion passed at council in time for it to be for the next.
I'm going to turn to
Sure.
Madam CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that we could do some public engagement. I think that if we're looking at a ward system, part of what that consultant would do would help us determine what those areas and boundaries would look like based on how the boundaries would have been set 20 years ago. Our demographics or our population and areas have expanded and changed, right? So I think that a very big portion of this would be, if we're looking at a ward system, if you're looking at reducing the number of councillors at large, I don't believe that that would take on the same type of consultation that would be required. I think that we would want to come back to council with a report on what we think a public education and communication plan could look like. So I think we'd want to take it offline. We might want to engage some consultation outside, could be just with legal counsel, probably with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. We'd want to do a little bit of engagement on that, and we could potentially come back to council with another report.
So yes, we could do it in next year.
I think we would like to come back with a report. I think that we might be able to do it, but I would like to make sure that we're able to do it properly.
Does endorsing this recommendation counter that at all?
Madam CAO? Or Madam Clerk, did you?
So,
Okay, Madam
so
Chair.
the endorsement of the recommendation tonight is really just to have council receive the report. If council votes to receive the report, then we could get another motion from council with direction to come back with a follow-up report with respect to public engagement.
Okay, thank you. I just want to comment. I mean, generally speaking, I'm not really in favor of wards. I know that that's not the conversation for tonight, but we're talking about two different things. The size of council as well and wards, and we seem to be just talking about wards right now as it relates to that public conversation. So the size of council, I think, is something we can maybe discuss separately from maybe wards in a report. So I will make that motion afterwards. So I'm fine with this report. It's actually very good. There's a lot of information in it. But I would like to see what we can do in the next year to have some public engagement in this process. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I agree. I think these are two separate issues, and I hope that in the future we'll deal with them separately, the size of council and the possibility of reverting to a ward system. And I have to say, I think, almost totally opposed to a ward system. So, but I think that debate will happen at another time, and I look forward to it.
Anybody else on this? Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if I understand, we're receiving this report, and Councillor Bergeron is going to be bringing a motion up at this meeting or in the future.
Sounds like he wants to do it
talk
now.
about direction for administration,
I'm allowed today. I will today.
just for clarification for me, so.
If I'm permitted
Are you
to do
going to
one
be
right
making a
after this?
motion?
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds like it's a motion to request a report, which
Yes.
can be done. It's in order in this meeting, so,
Mhm.
yes, Councillor Grant.
Good, thank you.
Any further discussion on this particular motion? I want to thank Councillor Towndale for the original motion. I personally see the two as connected. I don't care if we discuss them separately in two separate reports. I do think one has bearing on the other. But I thank Councillor Towndale for raising it, and it'll be interesting. I do think that there's some pieces of public consultation that we can do before we go down this road, but the information is helpful. Thank you. All in favor? Against? Carried. I'll recognize Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you. I'm writing quickly here, but I'd like to make a motion that council endorse a public consultation process on wards and a report from administration on timeline and cost. Is that in order?
So repeat that.
Let me,
Madam Clerk, did you get that?
To go for public consultation on introducing wards and the cost.
What
is-
timeline and cost, so that it fits within the year, so I just put timeline.
Just wards?
Wards and council size? Yes, we can have that conversation at the same time.
Is that motion clear? Is there a seconder? Councillor Bennett? Do you want to reread the motion just to be sure, and then we'll
I'm
debate?
not quite sure on the
Okay.
motion. So it's to go to public consultation with respect to wards and council size, and the timeline or the cost is what you're
Board
looking
from administration on timeline and cost.
Around a public consultation.
Yes.
for. Okay. Okay,
Is that clear?
it is now, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bennett, you're okay with that?
I'm very good with that, yeah.
All right, so debate on that. Councillor did you want to speak first, Councillor Bergeron?
Nope.
Okay. Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Grant.
I believe that the last term, we did discuss possibility of going to a referendum to reduce the size of council. And I recall that perhaps there was a deadline,
It's your baby.
you know, it was, like, was it 2 years before the election we have to?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it has to be decided before the year of the election.
The year of the
So
election,
our
okay.
deadline would be the end of 2021.
Okay, but we did discuss it last time and
did.
it didn't go anywhere, right? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would support it if the ward was pushed aside. I don't agree with that at all. I would support it if it was just to look at public consultation on council size. But I won't support the ward system because I don't agree with the ward system at all. It takes away the number of people that can run for council, so.
Oh, Councillor Bergeron was quite clear to talk about wards, so that's definitely part of the motion. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Your Worship. I kind of agree with my colleague, Councillor Grant. I don't subscribe to the ward system. In 91, it had just been eliminated back in 88, and I had the luxury or privilege, I'm not sure how you want to spin it, of serving with councillors who had been part of the previous ward system, and a number of them expressed to me at the time how challenging it was to get anything done, because of course everybody is kind of, her responsibilities to my own particular ward, and so when you start debating who gets the street and who gets the park and those types of discussions, it can be challenging to get anything done, and at the time they articulated that it just ground the, I mean, people suggest the government already goes at a somewhat slower pace. I think that's not always a bad thing, but the point is, I don't see it as beneficial to the community. Certainly, I'm always willing to listen to discussion about council size and what the public feels, although I have pretty set conviction about what I think of that too, but I'll let the public articulate their opinions. But as far as wards go, I don't believe in it, I don't subscribe to it, so I'm not going to support the motion as it is written. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Well, I'm in the same frame of mind as Councillor Grant, and over here, I don't support the ward system. I will not support it. There are a lot of reasons, and I look forward to the debate to put the reasons out why I do not support the ward system. At the time when we're debating it, they'll come out. I would like to separate the ward system from your motion.
Thank you. Councillor Dupel and then Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll support the ward system. I think it's not about what we want around the council table. I think it's what the public wants. And when we're looking for public engagement, I think we have to have an open mind whether or not it's something we believe in or we don't believe in. So I'll support the motion, and I think the two go together.
Councillor Bergeron and then Councillor Towndale.
You can go first if you like.
Oh, okay. Did you want to wrap up? Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm not here to start the debate on wards tonight by any means, but I think, you know, you were right when you said there is a correlation, because if you read the report that was provided to us, the size of council, it evolved. Started with, it was the ward system, then it was reduced by 2 because wards were no longer there. But the original size of 12 councillors plus the mayor was derived directly from wards. but I think there is a connection here, because if this were to happen, the wards will determine the size of the council. If it doesn't happen, then we have to take a look on what the size of the council might look like. But it's true. It's not how we feel personally about it necessarily. It's what the public wants. And public consultation is always a good idea. But I think the final question will likely have to be a referendum question. I think that's what it'll eventually come down to. Like I said, I'm going to take some time and come back with something. But in the meantime, there's no harm in having consultations right now. I think we should hear from the public. It does come up during election cycles, but it's never become a major issue. But like a lot of other things we're doing this term, we're having really good conversations with the public about water meters and other items. So why not continue it on this? This is a governance item. Let's hear from the public and hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Bergeron will wrap up.
Thank you. Just quickly, I mean, the motion does not endorse wards. I'm opposed to wards. That's the first thing I said. I agree. I don't think wards are the way to go, but the public has a right to give us input there first. And that's what I'm asking for. I don't think we should be paying $60,000 for a consultant, and that's why I'm saying let's get public input. You're going to have to do a darn good job to convince me my wards are important, but I'm willing to have that conversation and listen to it. I won't be changing the motion as it is. Thank you.
No, I didn't expect you to.
Well, just for the record.
I agree with those points. I think somebody said to me the other day, you're consulting us so much. You know, the public is getting a lot more requests for engagement. We want to hear from them. But I think that this is important on these issues. It does come up regularly. People do want to talk about how they are represented by this council and future councils. So I think a report on what kind of public consultation can take place and what that looks like is a good thing. $60,000 for a consultant on this is tough. So let's see if we can get some valid information, good information first before we make that decision. I'll remind people that we have not reviewed this in this community for 30 plus years. It's a while. So it's time for us to look at it. So I'm going to support the motion. All in favor? Against?
Why not?
Against? There. Yep.
No.
Okay.
That's the big-
Carried. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Follow up to compensation for the mayor.
So I will ask the acting mayor to take my spot as I go down to sit in his spot.
2 in a row.
Haven't sat down yet. You're already. Madam.
We'll read the motion,
Yep.
Mr. Acting Mayor. The recommendation is that council consider one of the following options to offset impact of the elimination of the tax exemption for 1/3 of the mayor's salary. Option 1, increase the mayor's contribution to an RSP to 18% of the mayor's annual salary to partially offset the impact of the tax-free exemption. Or option 2, provide a one-time increase in the mayor's annual salary in the amount of $8,000, which would result in the mayor's receiving the same net pay prior to the elimination of the tax-free exemption.
Thank you. I have Councillor Gardner first.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we receive this report and move it to budget, because I don't think the recommendation spoke to what I was trying to do or we were trying to do. So I'd like to receive this report and move it to budget.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Tondale, drinking water. So you have a seconder. If you'd like to speak more on that.
No, not really. I just want to move it to
Okay.
budget. That's where it should be.
Thank you. Have Councillor McDonald next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, and I stand to disagree with my colleague, Councillor Gardner. I don't think this is a budgetary issue. I think this has to do with us responding to a move on the part of the federal government and changing the, removing the 1/3 tax exemption to the mayor's salary. And so I think we should confront this now, and I think we should take steps to ensure that the mayor and the mayor's position gets the same fair response to that situation that councillors gave themselves in August. We didn't at that time say, let's put this off to budget. This has to do with the obligation of council once every 4 years to discuss compensation. And we haven't done that in the mayor's regard. So I think, no, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to put this off to budget. This is something that's actually 5 years overdue. So I think we have to move on it.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh.
I wouldn't support the motion either. We didn't put the increases for council. We didn't move that to the budget. We made the decision. The difference, we got two possibilities here, two recommendations. One is to increase the RSP contribution, and the other one is a $8,000 increase. And my math shows me there's only $3,000 difference between giving the $8,000 and the RSP increase. Is that right?
That is correct.
The math teacher will be proud of me. Anyway, okay, so I'm not going to support that motion. I think it should be decided tonight.
Thank you. Any other people wishing to speak? Madam Mayor?
So we did review the mayor's salary at the last council meeting. And so we have met the requirement that the province dictates that we review council and mayor's salary at least once during the term. So we've met that. I have indicated to all of you that I do not agree with this increase. I don't want it, and I did not ask for it. So I don't want this. I know this is a council decision, but I'm standing up to tell you what I told you by email this weekend, and what I've said to the public as well through my Facebook on Friday. So if you want to have a discussion at budget time, that's fine, around what the mayor's office needs in terms of resources to do what we need to push this community forward. That's something else. But in terms of the salary increase, I received cost of inflation the last council meeting, and I think that that is sufficient. And so I did not ask for this, I do not want this, and I will not support it.
Point of order, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Granted.
The motion before us is to refer this to budget or to deal with it now, not anything to do with the mayor's salary, literally. You know what I mean?
Yes,
So
I was
can
about
we
to state that.
get that motion out of the way, and then we can get into whether or not we should make a change to the mayor's salary?
We absolutely can. Is there any other comments on the motion on the floor, which is to defer this to budget and receive the report? No? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed?
The motion is to move this to budget?
Yes.
The motion was to move this to budget and to receive the report. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? Have a tie vote.
Gotta split the vote.
You have to vote.
You have to vote.
So I have to vote? I have to vote because it's a tie? Thanks. Thought I would get away with it here.
Some time to think about this.
So I will vote against it. I agree with the comments that have been stated. So the motion is defeated. Councillor Grant?
Thank you. I'll make a motion to accept option 1 of the report.
Do you have a seconder?
I don't know.
Let's ask. Is there a seconder for this motion? There is not. Anyone else care to make a motion before I see? Oh, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'd like to move that we choose option 2.
Do you? Is there a seconder for this motion, Councillor McIntosh?
Okay.
So we will debate now option 2.
So, okay. I think that the mayor's statement that we adjusted her salary in our last meeting is erroneous. We simply gave her the cost of living increase, which is, it kind of goes with your Canadian citizenship. I think that of the two options presented here, option 2 is the only fair one because it makes an exact monetary match to what has been cut from the mayor's salary. And this has nothing to do with Mayor Bernadette Clément. It has everything to do with the Mayor of Cornwall and the recompense for the duties of that mayor for the station, in the same way that the recompense that councillors get comes to us because of our office. And whatever decision we make stays with us for generations. as I think you will all recognize, when we moved to make some adjustments to our salary in August, we were making up for years of an inadequate increase, to the point where we were among the lowest in Eastern Ontario, if not the province, in councillor recompense. So now the mayor, I think, has a fair salary, but unfortunately, if she loses 1/3 of her tax exemption, then she's going to lose ground. And it'll never be made up for the person who sits in that chair. So we're not just making decisions that are going to affect Bernadette Clement. We are making decisions that will affect the mayor of Cornwall ad infinitum. And I think the only fair thing to do is to award $8,000, which will restore what she will lose and what any mayor of Cornwall will lose because of this move on the part of the government. So those are my reasons, and I hope my colleagues will support me.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bennett next, and then Councillor DePel.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Through you. I think the difference between the arguments I heard for council increase compared to this argument is that the councillors' pay was far below what the average was for cities our size. I don't think that's the case here with the mayor's salary. If I look at the charts, Eastern Ontario, population our size, 45,000. So I think we're already above that. It's the councillor salary and the mayor's salary is, the arguments are not valid as far as why we're wanting to do this. I think we have a mayor that's told us that she does not want the salary. She's the one who, the mayor is the one that we are trying to decide on here today. If the mayor doesn't want it, and we're trying to throw it, force it down their throat, actually. So I think if we're going to compare why the councillor decision was made, it doesn't hold water for me, because the council salary, as I said just a second ago, was much lower than the provincial average. And when I'm looking at this chart, unless I'm reading it wrong, we're above the Eastern Ontario average for the city of Cornwall. So I will not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DePel is next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yes, I will not support the motion either. I want to commend the mayor on her post on social media. I was delighted to read it. I didn't support the council one, so it doesn't have anything to do with councillor versus mayor. I just will not support the pay increase at this time.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hebert next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I won't support this, and might come as a surprise that I'm not supporting a well-deserved, I believe, pay increase. But first of all, the mayor has made it clear that she does not want this, and I'd like to respect those wishes. But secondly, and mainly, because I don't believe this report addresses what the original motion was. And so the motion that was asked of administration 2 weeks ago was to see where we could take these potentially extra dollars the mayor is not going to be receiving because of the change in taxes, and see if that can be provided to the mayor's department, not her salary. The mayor does great work within the community, could be doing a lot more. I know she's the capacity to do a lot more, but there is no budget there. And to the point where I believe she would deserve even a part-time chief of staff to work with her on the political side of issues within the city of Cornwall. And so I believe the motion, the request from Councillor Sid Gardner 2 weeks ago was that we evaluate this, but allocate it to the mayor and council's budget, so that the mayor would be able to promote the city, work on community building events, which she has been trying to do and is doing a really great job at it. But I think this extra money could go towards these efforts. So I would certainly support that $8,000 to go towards that budget. But out of respect of the mayor, I will refuse. I will vote against it going towards the salary. And if there is an opportunity at budget or a further motion to increase the mayor's department's budget, I would love to vote in favor of that at some point.
Thank you. I have Councillor Gardner next.
Short of being hit in the forehead with a sledgehammer, the mayor has made it very clear that she doesn't want it. We need to do it in another way that'll help her. The mayor's in the previous councils I sat on were nowhere near as busy as the mayor that we have now. And that's the reason I wanted to move it to budget, to try and get her some help. Now, my forehead hurts because I got hit. You made it very clear you don't want to vote against it.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Grant, I have you now.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. We're personalizing this and we shouldn't. We're talking about the mayor's salary, not the person that's in the chair right now. The person that's in, not you, Eric.
Just immediately, yes.
What we're looking at is the position and not the person. So let's look at the focus on the person, or the position, not the person, because this is going to have ramifications down the road. So I'm going to support the motion because it is, we're not taking away from the mayor's position from this 8,000. We're just getting it. So let's look at it from the mayor's position and not the person. So I think it's fair. The salary got cut by $8,000, was it?
Yes.
So that $8,000 is just bringing it up to what it was before. So in all fairness to you, Madam Mayor, it's nice to say those words, but let's look at the chair itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Towndale and then Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. This one's a tough one, but I think the original intent of the motion that was brought forward by Councillor Gardner was to take this potential extra money and provide it in a way to help the mayor, and that would be the mayor's office going forward as well, since we're going to depersonalize the position, and provide funding to augment the office if the person who's responsible for it right now isn't looking for that. You know, you're talking about now we're getting to a personal income versus an office resource. The mayor's salary, interestingly enough, while our councillor salaries were below the average, is actually above the average for this area, which I find rather odd. I don't know how that all came about. So, you know, I abstained in the other two votes. And it's no secret, although we met with the Integrity Commissioner earlier today, that an abstention under our own procedural bylaws is a no vote by another name, more or less. But I did it to make a point, and that's why I abstained. I could have voted no. You know, could have been easier to vote no. Instead, I abstained and I wanted to bring attention to the item. In this case, I'm hearing from the mayor, she doesn't want the salary personally. I know that Councillor Gardner's intent was not what we're voting on right now, and he's the one who brought this forward. I'm going to vote against this because I don't feel this is what we were trying to accomplish here. So from my perspective, based on the average in this area, the average provincially, what we were trying to achieve, what's going on, and the fact that we provide assistance in other ways, which might even be more valuable, I think we should go that route. So I'm against this.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Hollingsworth and then Councillor McIntosh to wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Worship. Just a question to Ms. Bailey. I know it's in the agenda somewhere, but I can't find it. In terms of other communities of comparable size, where does and I'm sure it's in there, I can't find it in the black and white. Where does the mayor's City of Cornwall mayor's salary fall? Comparable size and that kind of thing.
Mr. Acting Chair. What we've seen when we did the AMCTO study and participated in that is that the mayor's salary was comparable to those of other municipalities, though there is differences in what mayors across other municipalities receive. The study was done in 2017 for 2018 before the 1/3, but then we went out again to take a look at what mayors are being paid in 2019, and it seemed to be still comparable to Cornwall. But there are other factors
Right.
that RSPs accept.
When you did that review, for lack of a better word, in terms of Eastern Ontario, did you, I mean, and I've tried to find it, I've sniffed around, I'm sure it's there and I keep missing it, but when you did that review, was that province, like I saw the chart on page 64 of the agenda, where it has it at 54,904, and then you've got another set of communities province-wide at 68,000, is Central Ontario. So the question I'm asking is, in terms of Eastern Ontario communities comparable, higher, lower, do we know for sure? Because I think we all agree that a place like, let's say, Milton, which has got a reputation, is going gangbusters right now, and the kind of greater Toronto area municipalities, I'm not sure if we can compare Cornwall to those municipalities in terms of things like salary allotment, but Eastern Ontario, how is the mayor's salary rating?
The information that you see on page 64 wasn't a study that the city of Cornwall did. It was a study that was done through AMCTO.
Right. Okay.
And that was information that the clerk had provided, like many other municipalities.
Right.
So that is, they've separated it. That study was given to council a few reports ago. So
Right.
we've taken excerpts of that report as backup to this report, which notes that Eastern Ontario, population of just between, the 50,000, pays about 45 to 55,000.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. That being said, it would seem to me that we're higher than that 45,000 at the mayor's position. The mayor herself has already articulated she doesn't want to raise, but aside from that, we seem to be, based on these numbers, in about 10,000 or thereabouts higher than whatever other municipalities are. So, as already as mentioned by Councillor Bennett, when we discussed the council salary, we were considerably lower than the average, whereas in this case, the mayor's salary seems to be higher than the average, and therefore I'll not currently, at least, support the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
It's tough to give somebody a raise. It's, these numbers, were they before municipalities adjusted their salaries for elected officials after the Liberal government cut the 1/3?
Through you, Mr. Chair. They are. They're from 2017, reported in 2018.
Yeah.
So we did look at municipalities in our area following that, so that we would have more recent data. And it was really as many municipalities that had increased for the 1/3 exemption, that many municipalities did not. So where Peterborough did, Brockville didn't, where Belleville did, Gananoque didn't, Mississippi Mills didn't. And so it was really a hit or miss. So we see Peterborough that has a full-time, a part-time mayor at $72,000 in 2019. City of Brockville, so one municipality larger than us, but one municipality smaller than us, has a 2019 salary at $42,000.
Who had the 42,000? Brockville?
Brockville does,
Do they classify their mayor as full or part-time?
part-time.
Okay. We have classified her mayor, and she does work full-time. She works every weekend. She's out on the road. Yeah, so there's apples and oranges here when it comes to comparables. We're comparing Mississippi Mills and Gananoque. They ain't Cornwall. They got part-time officials, so that's what makes the number look lower than it really is. I think it is. Discussion too is that if we don't give the mayor the increase, we're going to have budget time. We're going to talk about increase in her office budget. So we're not saving any money here, if I'm reading this right. There seems to be, I'm not supporting the increase, but when it comes to budget, I might support an increase for the operations of the mayor's office. So, am I reading this right?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If there was a change approved this evening, we would include it in the 2020 budget. If there's no change approved this evening, it doesn't mean that council couldn't take a change to budget during budget deliberations.
Yeah, the argument I'm hearing about the budget discussion is that we'll we'll look at increase in the mayor's operational costs, the cost of operating that office, which could be almost the same as this.
And that would be a discussion at
Yeah,
budget.
yeah, so it's not a case of saving money, it's whether we want to bow to the mayor's wishes that, hey, I don't want the money, look at it some other time. Interesting conversation. I don't think we've ever had this around a council table before.
Thank you. Everyone has spoken. I will allow the mayor to speak first. She looked like she had something to say, and then you can wrap up. Yep.
So I'll go back to page 64 of the report. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, question to Madam CFO. So when I look at Eastern Ontario, the range is 45,000 to 54,000. If you're talking, trying to get that range.
Yes.
So if we are at 48,000 people, we're closer to the 50,000.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, that's what I was indicating. Like, I wouldn't want to put us in with 25 to 50,000 at 45,000, probably in between the 45, 55,000 range.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. So you've heard my comments. I understand that this is awkward and unusual, to Councillor McIntosh's point, but I understand what you mean, Councillor McDonald and Councillor Grant, about thinking forward. And it's hard not to personalize this as I stand here talking to you. So I appreciate how respectful you've all been in this discussion, but I maintain my comments. I did not ask for this increase, and I do not want it. But of course, it is up to council, and it is a council decision.
Thank you. I'll let Councillor McDonald wrap up, and then we'll call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Well, I know that our mayor didn't ask for this increase, but she also didn't ask for a 1/3 hit to her salary, which she is suffering regardless. So I just want to say that the fact that our current mayor doesn't want this, I think, should not be a factor here, because we are deciding something that goes with this office for all time. Because in 4 years' time, we're not going to try to make it right for the next mayor. And I think the comparison to other municipalities, it is tricky. I mean, it's apples and oranges. It's all over the place. Rockville at 42,000, they're half our size. So it's hard to even consider them a comparable municipality, even though we often compare ourselves to them. But I think maybe one of the pitfalls in this discussion is, here we are thinking, okay, there's $8,000 on the table that we could square her salary with what it has been in the past if we simply awarded it to her, but instead, no, we're going to spend it instead. We're going to say it's going to go to enhance the work of the office, or it's going to do this. That's insulting. I think we should just put the $8,000 in her salary, let her do with it as she will, and let the next mayor do with it as he or she will. Give it to charity, pay it, out in PR, give it to the community, whatever. But it's rightfully belongs to the person sitting in the office of the mayor, and I think decisions on how it's spent should be given, made by that person, and the money should definitely be given to them too. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's spoken.
Recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Madam Clerk,
Read the motion, please.
if you could read the motion, please.
To provide a one-time increase in the mayor's annual salary in the amount of $8,000, which would result in the mayor receiving the same net pay prior to the elimination of the tax-free exemption. Councillors Claude McIntosh,
Yes.
Elaine McDonald,
Yes.
Sid Gardner,
No.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Opposed.
Caroline Ebar,
Opposed?
Councillors Modeste Dupel,
Opposed.
Glenn Grant,
Favor?
Todd Bennett,
Opposed.
Justin Towndale,
No.
Eric Bergeron.
In
Acting
favor.
Mayor, sorry, and Mayor Bernadette Clement.
No.
Defeated.
Motion is defeated. Thank you. We're good?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Cornwall and Area Chamber of Commerce request to provide limited complimentary parking in December. The action recommended is that A, council receive this report, And B, that council provide direction with respect to the Chamber of Commerce's request.
Councillor Towndale, are you making that?
Yeah,
Go
I'll make the
ahead.
motion that we agree to this request, Madam
Okay.
Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor McIntosh. Debate. Councillor DePel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering through you to administration I realize that the chamber is asking for 4 p.m., but I was just wondering like what it would look like if we did it earlier in the day, started it earlier in the day.
So, Madam CAO, do you want to direct that question?
I'm going to redirect it to Mr. Wallow, if we can.
I believe he's really proportioned it over the 2 hours per day, and so it'd probably be 50% more for an extra hour.
For an extra hour?
Yeah, assuming, of course, that the hours are equal.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure that they are, but.
And what kind of dollars would we be talking about for down, like just?
So
double
we're
what-
looking at $7,200
Yeah.
for an approximation of the cost. And so, of course, per hour, $3,600 per hour. And so additionally, proportionally, you know, again, I'm not sure whether 3 to 4 is similar to 4 to 5. So.
All right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Just one question to you, Mr. Boileau. 7,200, is this not really technically a grant? Like, if we're eating $7,200, is it not kind of similar to a grant if somebody came and said we would like a grant to do whatever? Is it not safe to say that this kind of falls into that same kind of equation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the parking is a little bit different than some other services we provide in the sense that it's a self-financing
Right.
program. So really it's, if we're taking away some revenue somewhere, we need to find the revenue from other, but it's the users that are paying, it's not the general public that's paying. So there could be, for example, people who don't contribute to this because they don't pay for parking.
That being said, and perhaps I'll let you off the hook a little bit and move over to your associate right beside you, your worship, if you might. So I'm assuming we budgeted for the 7,200 in our operating budget back in February or whenever we approved it. That's based on the assumption that we would have made this $7,200 at this point?
Madam CFO?
For you, Madam Mayor. So we would have budgeted to receive this $72,000 because, sorry,
72,000, wow, that's a little different number there.
So what it would be, to your point, is it's revenue that the city will not collect. So we would, if everything else worked out perfectly in our budget, we would be $7,200 short in revenue. But like Mr. Boileau said, this is not an activity that is supported by the tax base. It's supported by revenue generated by parking and parking enforcement. So those revenues would, additional revenues would offset this loss of revenue. And if the department overall had a deficit, it would be funded from the parking reserve.
Point is, we budgeted for $7,200 and we're not getting that $7,200. We need to find the money somewhere else because we made an assumption at budget time that in December we would collect this money, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I guess my point is, Your Worship, I get where the BIA is coming from. I don't really necessarily have our chamber, sorry, I don't have a problem with it per se, but we talk about budget, we talk about putting line items in, and Councillor McIntosh has articulated on a few other things that we've kind of awarded to various groups and said, you know, we're already starting it a little bit behind the 8 ball. Well, once again, if we're going to approve this, it's worth noting that we're already, as of January 1, 7,200 additional dollars in the hole. Now, I realize it doesn't seem like a phenomenal amount of money. It's not going to put us in, you know, declaring bankruptcy, but it's all those things. And I mean, we're sitting on a grant committee, and I think it's worth noting to the committee that somehow this type of thing has to be incorporated as well when we talk about grants, because you can call it whatever you want. When we're losing $7,200, we're giving somebody a grant. that's, I mean, spin it any way you want. We're down 7,200, but I'll support it, but in future, I think we need to nail this down as to how we're gonna handle it. Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor McDonald.
In respect to Councillor Hollingworth's theory on this, is that we know this is going to come up every year, I think. You know, I mean, this happened last year, it's going to happen this year. Could we not, at budget time, build something and say, hey, you know, we're going to have $7,200 missing? It won't be missing if we don't put it in.
Can I go to the CAO first?
Yeah.
Budget accordingly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'll come to you, Mr. Bell.
I think, consistent with Councillor Hollingsworth's comments, during that grant application process, we look for services in kind, whether it's waiving fees for any of our, sometimes we have people that want to use our parks, our buildings for special events. All of those things fall into that application process. And then the city budgets accordingly because revenues for departments are made whole through that process. So to your comments, I think that this is something, if they're going to come forward with these requests in future years, I think we could simply ask the chamber to submit that request through that same process as everybody else. We make sure that whatever the revenue that is foregone, it's properly budgeted for, and we don't have to have these conversations, you know, days or weeks before the
I
request
think that
coming
issue
through.
was raised last year, the same argument, that, you know, can you tell us a little more in advance, like 9 months in advance, maybe?
So I will make sure that we draft a communication.
Yeah. Mark, or through you, Madam Mayor, Mark, when you mentioned the per hour, what we make, I know this is probably impossible, but is there more revenue comes in between 11 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon? Is 4 to 6 really a slack time? There's no way of analyzing that.
Mr. Boileau.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm sure there is now because of the automation that we've put in place that could show you exactly when, you know, money is coming in. I would have to guess that certainly in these hours that people are going to restaurants and so on, that the activity is a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But-
We don't enforce anything after 6 o'clock,
No,
and we don't enforce on.
sorry, we don't enforce
At
parking
6
requirements.
Yeah, parking, exactly.
Right.
And we
Anything else?
don't give out parking meter tickets on Saturday?
No.
No, so it's a freebie on Saturday and Sunday. Okay. Another thing too is how do we get the word out? I remember I mentioned this last year. Okay, social media is fine and everything, but the guy pulls up in a parking meter. You know what the first thing I do? Go and get your ticket, put it on the windshield, not thinking, oh yeah, right, 4 to 6.
Yeah, through you.
It can't be a total loss because there must be people still paying for parking,
Yeah.
not realizing they don't have to.
We, and the Chamber have made it clear in their letter that they're happy to try to help out with their social media and different avenues as well, and we would do the same thing. In fact, we would probably, you know, if this becomes a more formalized process, we should put it in the budget for 2020 now. But also we would put information out to the public. And for that reason also, we don't think that it should be limited to the BIAs because, that's 5th Street. So on that side of 5th Street, you're paying, and this side you're not, so no. All meters would be.
You're reading my mind, exactly. My next question was, why do we just limit to one area? Because the guy, how do I know which is in BIA and which isn't, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mark.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
And I support this request on the part of the DBIA wholeheartedly. I think we have a big debt of gratitude that we tender to the DBIA all the time. They are doing what benefits all of us in trying to maintain the health and vitality and well-being of our downtown. We don't want a deserted core. We've got all these restaurants down there. When you consider last week, or about a week and a half ago, we had the Shop a Block. It was a wonderful event the DBA put on to try to stimulate business downtown. And one of the ways we can help sustain that initiative is by not penalizing people by making them pay for parking. You see, downtown businesses have this great disadvantage of not being on a mall site. We're happy they're not on a mall site, because that's not downtown, and it's not really the heart of the city in the same way that our downtown is. So I think this is a small gesture the council can make to support the efforts of the DBIA to keep our downtown viable. So I just wish we could just lift the parking obligation for the whole month of December, but that's not what they're asking for. I'm glad, because we might not be able to get that swung, but I hope we can at least do this, because we owe the DBIA a big assistance in this. Thank you.
Councillor Grant and then Councillor Bergeron.
My points have been covered, thank you, Madam Mayor.
So Councillor Bergeron and then Councillor Hébert.
Thank
You're on the list, Councillor Hébert.
First question is
So are you,
to
Councillor Copeland.
Ms. Bailey, if I can, behind me. Can you outline the total cost to the taxpayer of us implementing this?
Madam CFO.
Madam Mayor, so there is no cost to the taxpayer.
Thank you. Which is different from a grant in general.
In general, it's different from a grant, though Councillor Hollingsworth noted it is lost revenue.
So, on that note, this department is self-funded in general. It's supposed to use the money it generates. Are we factoring in the fact that there will be less work to do during this time? Is that $7,200 factor in that there is less enforcement during that time?
Mr. Boileau?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the enforcement would of course remain the same. There would be less work involved in terms of having to go from one vehicle to the next, but of course ensuring that, you know, fire hydrants, close to intersections, et cetera, et cetera. All of that needs to be enforced. It also allows that staff, we're trying to move to, as opposed to having people doing just parking and just property standards and doing general bylaw, to have all of our bylaw officers doing everything. So it could allow, certainly in the future, for a parking, somebody who is currently only doing parking, to perhaps also be doing property standards, general bylaw.
Great, that sounds like a good conversation at budget time. So I mean, I support this. I think at budget, I'd like to talk about free parking downtown, a whole bunch of different issues that have come from this. But what I like most is that this isn't coming from the taxpayer. This is coming from its own fund, and so I support it. Thank you.
Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've done this for more than 2 years now. It's been a few years.
Mr. Boileau, do you know?
I think it's been 2 years.
Just 2 years? Okay. I think it's something that we'd obviously support year after year. I would hope that administration would take the cue here and potentially budget for this every year. If we need to have that official vote at budget time, then I'd be happy to support it then, so that we can just include this as a regular budget. I wouldn't expect this to be an in-kind application or a grant application, because I believe those are sort of one-offs. And I think Christmas will just keep happening every year, as far as I'm concerned. And people will just keep shopping every December. So I can't expect this to not happen in the future. So would certainly support this just being part of our regular budget going forward, so that this request doesn't have to come, and that automatically December 1st we roll into these parking times.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner and then Councillor Bennett.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Ms. Bailey, what amount of money did we put in reserves last year from the parking bylaw? Or from the
Madam
meeting,
CFO?
sorry.
So I don't have the information of how much money we put in the reserve last year. And I have, sorry that I'm thinking, but I have the report up for second quarter. And so we probably put in approximately $20,000 or $30,000 a year into that reserve. It depends on what revenues there are compared to expenses to balance the budget at the end of the year.
But I will support what the chamber is asking for. As far as I'm concerned, the Christmas shopping is coming in December. I want people downtown and have businesses thriving rather than respectfully going to the mall. We have some restaurants down, we have clothing stores, we have people that need to come downtown to buy here. If it was up to me, we would not have any parking meters downtown. Especially now when I see a snowfall and people are trying to climb over snow piles and can't get to the meters, and it's frustrating, and that's driving them out of the city. So I don't want to see that. I think the chamber's doing the right thing. I really have a major problem, even the front of this, and I know Councillor Grant's going to say something about that, but even access to the front of this building, where people coming in and paying their taxes have to climb over snowbanks. Come on, guys, we need to do something. I just don't agree with them at all. Meters should be gone in the downtown.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I think, possibly to the CFO. Year one, when this was done, I could see that this wouldn't have been budgeted for. It would have been a surprise. Year two, maybe the same thing. But when you're making a budget, if you're budgeting a department that draws in revenue, would you say, okay, last year we made X number of dollars. This year we should make a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but you budget for that, I would assume.
Through you, Madam
Yes.
Mayor, what we do for revenue is we base it on a trend. And so we'll take a look at what has happened over the last 3 years, and we adjust that for any price increases.
Okay, so if this is year three, am I assuming correctly that we would have taken the last 2 years' revenue and said, okay, we're gonna make this much money, so, because we didn't make $7,200 last year, we didn't make $7,200 the year before. So is that what we based the projections for 2019, or do we just say, okay, maybe we won't do the $7,200 this year, so we'll put that in there? Just how did we come up with the budget?
There's probably a little bit, through you, Madam Mayor, there's probably a little bit of that going on in this budget, because it is an estimate, it's an average, and it's $7,200. It's not a lot of money
No.
in the scheme of things for the parking department. So it may have realized itself within the 2019 budget. By the way, we are budgeting by our trends and prices, increase in price if there was an increase in price for parking.
Okay, so basically, we're getting to the point where it's probably going to be in the budget automatically. So if we're budgeting for it, at least starting next year, and this is clearly beneficial to our downtown, I would support this motion for sure, and I think the budget will sort itself out, I think, moving forward.
Madam CFO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, administration wouldn't say that it's not revenue in the budget, though, because this is a service change, and that is not a decision of administration to make, right?
Right.
And so for us, we budget on a 3-year average, take into consideration price changes, and that's our budget. But if an organization comes to council with this request, we will bring it to council and not say it's in our budget, because it isn't. That's not, we didn't specifically look at our revenue and say, let's take off $7,000 for this to be accommodated.
Okay, I understand that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I understood that, but we're using an average over 3 years, so we're missing $7,000 per year, so it's eventually going to show itself.
It will.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this motion? So I will vote in support as well. I agree with many of the comments stated around the table, particularly those of Councillor Hébert. I think we need to start just factoring this in. I am downtown a lot. A lot. To Councillor McIntosh's point, I am full-time everywhere in this city, including Sunday. So yesterday I went to Vagabond Theatre's production at the Art Center, BMO building, and I walk out and shopkeeper stops me, and what do you think he wants to talk about? Parking. Any store I go into downtown, the first item for discussion is parking. Snow removal around the parking meters themselves, the process. Yeah, let's do this at Christmas time. So I support. All in favor? Against? Carried. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Municipal Works two-way radio. The action recommended is that council approve a non-competitive procurement for the lease and installation of a two-way radio communication system from Bearcom for a term of 5 years for a total of $233,740.50.
So you need a motion. Councillor Grant, Councillor Towndale, debate? Questions? We're getting tired. All in favor? Against? Carried. Madam Clerk?
We have two new business items that were distributed prior to the meeting. The first one is the lighting of the Rotary Traffic Circle. Whereas the lights around the Rotary Traffic Circle are no longer displayed as in years past. Now therefore be it resolved that Council direct administration to prepare a report on the cost of improving the lighting display around the Rotary Traffic Circle. Moved by Councillors Éric Bergeron and seconded by Councillor Towndale.
Councillor Bergeron?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I tried to be pretty direct and to the point here. I was driving around the traffic circle. I'm getting a lot of feedback on this, and instead of this being, 6 or 7 different councilors emailing different administrators, I just want to report what can be done. How can we? What does council need to do to increase that? And I'm hoping the report comes back and just says, here's the cost, here's how quickly we can do it, and here's what's missing. It's very simple, but I think the image of our city is important. I think right now the traffic circle is maybe not the best representation of our city right now, and I'd like council to address that.
So I have Councillor Towndale and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I basically agree with everything Councilor Bergeron just said. Same thing applies. It's last year I know there was an issue with the flagpole and that impacted the lights that we put up, and that's kind of where it started. But I think over the years growing up here and seeing the traffic circle, it was always very bright at Christmas, and now it's kind of come down from that a little bit. So I think we need to reevaluate what that is. And it is an image, it does reflect on our city, but it also is something that the residents enjoy. They always look forward to it, and over the years, I think it's changed. So we have to look at bringing that back, in my opinion. I saw it at night last night, and I thought it could look a little different like it used to. So I'd like to see what our options are, come back with some options. I know there will be a cost to this, but this is something that I think is worthwhile investing into. It's part of the season, and it's part of our community. Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Grant.
That was a council decision I believe, it was a council decision to tone down the lighting when we went through a budget process a couple of years ago. There were a number of series of things to cut, and that was one of them. Reduced lighting at...
Do you want confirmation of that, Mr. Fothrop?
Madam Mayor, yes, there was a reduction there. I can't remember offhand what the value of the reduction was. but
Several
it was,
$1,000s. Several $1,000s.
Thank
So
you.
it's a budget item. We took it out of the budget. Now we're going to have to talk about putting it back in the budget. But it was a council decision to reduce the lighting, along with several other things that went on.
Thank you. Councillor Grant?
One of my questions was, how many years since we stopped lighting the traffic circle?
Mr. Fothrop, do you know?
Madam Mayor, we have been lighting the traffic circle, but last season there was a change in that the pulley at the very top of the flagpole broke. We used to pull up a multiple strings of lights that kind of made for a large sort of Christmas tree sort of effect. It broke at the top, and when we reviewed it with our contractor, they informed us that the weight of all those Christmas lights should not have been put on the flagpole, despite the fact that it had been done for many years prior. And so when we repaired the flagpole, we made sure that we wouldn't do that again. So the past seasons, we've just stuck to doing stuff around the perimeter of the traffic circle and some of the trees within the bar vents.
So nothing's been changed in the flagpole area itself to reinforce or to?
No, it would be, you would have to do either possibly replace the flagpole or have something designed to do that same thing. And it was a fairly costly repair.
Okay. And the report, no date, you assume you want this as soon as possible for our next meeting? Is that part of the motion, or?
Madam CAO, is that going to be possible?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know if we can get a report back to council at the next meeting. I'm going to look to staff. We have
We're doing the water and sewer budget in the next meeting?
We're doing, a week from tonight, we're doing water and wastewater budget, that is correct. So,
I think we just got most of the report, that's why I was wondering. So, if we could get it for our next council meeting, because it's basically a Christmas item, and, or seasonal item, I should say, and so.
Okay.
If that's part of the motion, then I'll support it.
Madam CAO, is that going to be possible?
we will do what we can.
So then it's part of the motion.
So that's a friendly amendment?
Yes. Anybody else on this one? Councillor DePel?
I just think that moving forward, maybe looking for next year, but I don't
Yeah.
really see how it's possible. We're November 25th today. Expect administration to bring this back at the next council meeting, then order supplies that you're gonna need.
It's
You're
December.
gonna have the traffic circle well decorated into January and February. I'm sure it's not gonna happen in December. I just think it's added pressure to the administration to bring this report back so quickly, but for sure, we could look at having the report back so that we could have it at budget time and look for next year.
So I'm going to go back to Madam CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, next council meeting is December the 9th. So even if we brought a report back to council, we do not have funds in the budget this year, so we would have to come up with a recommendation to council with respect to funding that, whether or not items could be ordered and implemented prior to Christmas season.
Christmas Eve.
Right now, I can't make that promise. So if council would like a report on the next agenda, we will do our best to try and bring a report back to the next council meeting.
That doesn't guarantee that it's going to be done before Christmas, in terms of the lighting of the circle, if it passes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I have Councillor Gardner, Councillor Bergeron.
Personally, I don't think this can be done before a week or a few days before Christmas. I'm gonna vote against it, but I hope that administration puts it back into the budget next year so we can do it properly and a proper timeline. This is way too short. If you're going for the 9th, the equipment comes in on the 12th to 15th, it goes up on Christmas Eve. I don't support it.
Anybody else on this before I go to Councillor Bergeron to wrap it up? Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you. So my first question, I suppose, would be, Mr. Fothrop, do we turn the lights off on Boxing Day?
Mr. Fothrop or Mr. Porter?
Yeah, actually, I'll maybe ask Scott to.
Mr. Porter?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we keep the lights on until the end of January,
I thought so. Thank you.
because there's the Christmas kind of goes into the 15th or other.
Greek Orthodox goes to January the 11th.
Thank you.
So, look, the motion is pretty straightforward. If it can't happen before Christmas, so be it. I would love to see it at the next meeting. I don't think it's a very complicated report. I think we already have most of that information. What I'm trying to eliminate is several counselors getting phone calls about this and you receiving information from 17 different people and trying to report back. So this, to me, actually simplifies your life moving forward as administrators in the sense of put it down on paper, tell us what it's going to cost, and we'll have that discussion. And if that's the meeting after Christmas, so be it. To me, these are seasonal lights. They're on all winter, and that's why I'm bringing it forward tonight. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Against? Against? Did you get that?
It's carried.
Carried? Okay. Next item, please.
Lighting in Lamoureux Park, again proposed by Councillors Éric Bergeron and Justin Towndale. Whereas the lights from Canada 150 were generally regarded as improving the visual image of our city and Lamoureux Park. Now therefore be it resolved that Council request administration to prepare a report on the cost of re-implementing the Canada 150 lighting display on a permanent basis.
So Councillor Bergeron, I'm anticipating a question from Councillor Grant or other councillors around the timeline for this. You may want to speak to that as you speak to your motion.
Sure. It's not in the motion, but I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
I would like this to be received as soon as administration is capable of doing it. So I would ask maybe what the timeline would be, even best guess, before I put a date to it.
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that staff might want to provide a little bit of additional commentary with this. I believe that when we had the lights from the Canada 150 celebration in our park, based on, I'm not an electrician, but based on the lighting and the cables that were on the ground, it was problematic. It is not meant to be there on a permanent basis. So I think I'd like to refer this to Mr. Fothrop just to provide some additional commentary, because it's a little bit more complicated than.
Through you, Madam
Yeah, Mr.
Mayor,
Fothrop.
That is exactly what happened. We have a group called the Electrical Safety Authority that did raise concerns with the lights being within the trees in the park. They were okay with it on a temporary basis to celebrate Canada 150. But as those lights remained in place, they issued us a directive to remove them or to extend underground power to every location. What they have an objection to is the use of extension cords to bring power throughout the park. They want if each tree were to be lit, they would like underground electrical and a power supply at each tree.
So, but the question was around timeline to get the report back. That's what I want in the report.
And that would take a little more, I mean, we have the numbers for what it cost us to do erect the lighting using extension cords, but in order to determine where precisely, what trees we're going to light, where power is available, and trying to price that out would be a bigger task. So I would say likely not. It would be difficult to do. We wouldn't be able to do that by December 9th.
Thank you. Can it be done by budget time?
Yes.
So then that's the date I'd like to put to the motion, is that this be included as a budget item.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Sounds like it is. Is the seconder okay with that? Councillor Towndale?
Thumbs up.
So,
So if I can speak to it now, there's a reason I separated these two, and it's exactly because of this conversation. I'm aware this one is probably a little more complicated, a little more involved, and so it won't happen in the next few weeks. I do receive a lot of feedback, though, on the look and feel of the park at night and in the winter. And so I would just love to know what that cost is, so this council can say, you know, we value this at this amount, and maybe if you tell me it's $200,000, maybe we'll not do it. But if you tell me it's a few $1,000s, then that's a conversation to have at this council table. And that's what I really want to have, is that ultimately the image of our city is our responsibility here. And these are the types of things that make a big difference to our citizens, the tourists coming downtown. People are coming off that bridge now, going down Water Street, and that visual is really important. And so I don't want this to just be forgotten, and that's why this motion exists. Thank you.
thank you. So I have Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor McDonald.
Oh, I was just going to talk about the timing of this, because the report, it would have to go into next year's budget, and I never realized that we were talking about underground wiring, and Councillor Bergeron comes from a family we know all about that, and that could be quite expensive, and I'd be very interested to see what the cost. $200,000 just might be on the bit on the low side. But anyways, good to get the report. Take a look at it. It looked great in the winter with the lighting, but there could be a heavy price tag.
Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm really glad this is going to budget for deliberation, because I think the emotional impact of those lights in the park, you just couldn't estimate it. It was wonderful. And the same thing with the traffic circle. And from a city perspective, that was one of the photographs chosen. When you walk in the front door of the Civic Complex, you see a picture of the lights of the park when it was lit during 2017. So I think it's a very worthy goal, and it's worth putting it in budget so we can really have a well-timed and exhaustive discussion about it, because I think it was very important. And I think if we're bringing these motions forward, I think lights do wonders for a city.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think when the park was lit up for Canada 150, it was quite stunning at night. It was all white light, white Christmas lights, and it had an impact. It looked sharp. Obviously, there were some difficulties. We have limitations in what we can do, but at least we'll get a good look at this. It's always worthwhile to see what's feasible, what's not. You know, there is electricity in the park, obviously very limited, but down the road, I think, you know, we know there are some trouble spots existing right now with the current electrical setup in the park, so eventually we're going to have to look at addressing those issues. Not to get ahead of ourselves here, putting the cart before the horse, but you know, this is something that once we have that information and once we have to actually take a look at that, maybe that can be factored in. Because if we're going to have to redo the electric, then you know, you can look at a bigger thing. Maybe there's other options to illuminate that are easier to do. I know the clock tower, we retain the lights on there, looks good. I know that's easier to do because there's electricity on site, but you know, we'll look forward to see what's in this report, to see what's good and what's not.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Waterfront Committee, I believe was in the last term, early on, engaged a company, and for life I can't remember the name of it, about lighting our park. And there were several people, I believe from administration, some councillors that came out to see the demonstration. And what we basically did was, there's a pole, a post I guess, that would go in the ground that had lights, and it would shine up on the trees, and one would cover 8 to 10 trees in a row. And you could set it to do different colors, you could set it to move, you could keep it one color if you like. It was beautiful, it really, really was. And I'm sure that report is somewhere in the archives of the Waterfront Committee, but it was definitely looked at, and I'll tell you, with about probably 6 or 8 of those situated through the park, you could probably light up most of the trees you see from the road. So I think if we're gonna look at this, good luck finding it. It's gotta be 4 years, maybe 3 years ago. Anyway, I think that would be the way to go, rather than running electricity to every tree we have in the park. Seems a little bit extreme, but I think 6 or 8 of those and you'd really have a nice looking effect. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I'll support the motion through you, and I'm looking forward to getting a report back, find out what the cost is going to be and what direction we might want to take.
Anybody else? Thank you for the discussion on the timeline, Councillor Bergeron. That's helpful. Councillor Bennett, I was one of those councillors that went out to that demonstration. It was cold, I remember, but it was successful. It did look interesting. So there are options that can be reviewed. Councillor Elaine McDonald, yes, I remember when the park was lit up, and people talked about that all the time, how beautiful it was, and we all felt good about it. So lights, a good thing. Any further comments from Councillor Bergeron? All said? All in favor? Against? Carried. Yes.
Bylaws 2019-144 to 2019-148 inclusive, listed on the agenda, are being presented to Council for adoption.
Moved by, Councillor McDonald?
I'd like to ask a question about 20.2, if I may. So can we exclude that one from the vote?
Is that okay, Madam Clerk?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we'll need a motion, but we're excluding 20.2. Councillor Hébert moved, seconded by Councillor Depel. Discussion? All in favor? Oh,
Nope.
all in favor? Carried. Madam Clerk?
So now bylaw 145 is the annual renewal of service contracts for childcare.
So, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few quick questions. This was a huge bylaw because there are 9 reports embodied in it. It took a long time to go through, but I've got 3 questions I'd like to ask about it. There's a reference to the wait list that the city maintains for all the all the daycare spaces. And I was under the impression a couple of years ago that we didn't have a wait list, that anybody who wanted subsidized daycare could have it. I think that was due to a provincial grant. But does this mean we do have a wait list now? And if so, how long is the waiting period for people?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do not have a wait list currently. We are responsible to maintain a wait list should there be a wait list, but we do not have one at this time.
That's great news. Thank you. Another point, there's a reference to pay equity and wage enhancement policies. So with regard to the pay equity, apparently workers qualify for 1% pay equity raise or benefit every year. Does that have an end time, like 1% for so many years, and at some point they're going to be equal to what or to whom? Like what class were they compared to that obtained the levy of 1% a year to
Through you,
reach
Madam
pay
Mayor,
equity?
This was before my day, I must admit, but we do have an obligation under this pay equity agreement. It is a very small amount. It's about $50,000 annually that we are required to pay to certain childcare agencies covered under this agreement. So as long as that childcare center is open, we're obligated to pay equity.
So not everybody in our childcare system gets this 1% pay equity?
That is correct.
Well, I wonder if maybe the manager of Human Resources might know a little bit of the history here. What working class were the childcare workers compared to that gained them the 1%, and why wasn't it universal?
Mr. Clark?
Yes, maybe you don't know.
I am not familiar with it at all,
Okay.
Councillor. We would have to look at the plan in its entirety and all the history of
Right,
comparators
okay,
and
that's fair,
whatnot.
yeah.
But without that, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to comment.
So sometime, because I don't think we talk about pay equity very often here, and I'm often curious, I don't hear complaints about pay equity in our workers, but I'd sure love to be assured that all's well on that front. And then my next question has to do with wage enhancement, and I guess this is something that is, must be applied for every year or it's lost, which is kind of unfortunate. But what it's meant to do is to retain workers in the systems, the childcare places that aren't within schools, I guess. So I'm wondering if you have any idea what the retention, how big a problem is it? What's the workforce turnover there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so if I can just clarify, compared to the workers in the childcare system versus in the education system?
But they're both childcare workers, eh? The ones
They
in,
are.
yeah.
So
they're registered, I guess, in the school
The
system.
purpose of the wage enhancement grant is in order to bring the workers in the childcare system who are not employed in the school system, to bring them closer to the wages into the school system.
Mhm.
They are not equal even with the wage enhancement.
No.
I cannot speak to the turnover in either one of those systems. However, there are challenges in the ECE system retaining ECEs.
For sure, yeah. If the wages aren't adequate, obviously, people look elsewhere and you can't fault them for it. So, well, thank you for that.
Do you want to make that motion, Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Yes, seconded by Councillor Ibaya. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Next section is the reports from standing special committees of council.
Any reports? Next item.
Notice of motions, and we do not have any. Pending business listing. The pending business listing of Monday, November 25th is being presented to council to receive.
Moved by Councillor Dupel, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
And our confirming bylaw 149 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the City of Cornwall at its meeting held on Monday, November 25th.
Moved by Councillor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Grant. All in favor? Carried. We've been meeting since 4 o'clock today with very little time for any break. So I want to thank all of the councillors, including all the staff in the room, for your work on behalf of the citizens of Cornwall. Merci. Motion to adjourn. Councillor McIntosh, Councillor Ribad, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
No argument here on adjournment.
Not normally.